I'm sitting here continuing my conversation with Sidney Powell. Her book is Licensed to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice. Alas, it is a nonfiction book. It reads like a thriller. Nothing could be more important. Sidney Powell, I have to say, it thrills me to think that you are doing what you're doing, that you're exposing these things, that you're writing about these things. And I want on this program to be a resource to you to get the message out, because Americans need to understand what we're up against in our elections and in these battles. These are not small stakes.
No, they're not small stakes, and what's really terrifying is it happens to a lot more people. I mean, you have to realize that if they can do this to a United States Senator, Ted Stevens, and then turn that power, that same power of abuse against Carter Page and Paul Manafort and Roger Stone and General Flynn and the President of the United States, imagine what they're doing to anybody else that they want to railroad.
So now when we talk about there's several theys here. But prosecutorial abuse in general strikes me as one of these cases in American life that it's fundamentally un-American. The idea that prosecutors wield the power they do, it's grotesque. It is inhuman. It's cruel and inhuman punishment what they're able to do to squeeze people to get plea deals. And when did this start? Have we had this from the beginning of the Republic?
I'm sure there's been some of it from the beginning, but I noticed a change in the last 20 years. It's as though prosecutors realized they could punch their tickets to multi-million-dollar salaries in international law firms or get positions in the highest halls of government if they used the law as a weapon instead of as a measure of justice. That's what they started doing. That's what I identified in Licensed to Lie. And the prosecutors I identify in the book became Obama's longest-serving White House counsel, General Counsel, Deputy Director of the FBI, the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division of Department of Justice.
Well, name their names, not just the titles. Who are we talking about?
Andrew Weissman.
Andrew Weissman, yes, I've heard incredibly bad things about Andrew Weissman, and he was part of the Mueller team.
Yes. Well, he was first Deputy Director of the Enron Task Force, appointed during the Bush administration, handpicked by people like Michael Chertoff. And it was there that he destroyed Arthur Anderson and 85,000 jobs, only to be reversed by unanimous Supreme Court 2.5 years later. And then went on to indict the 4 Merrill Lynch executives for something that wasn't a crime, and sent them to prison for a year while he hid the evidence that showed they were innocent, along with Catherine Rumler, who then became Obama's White House counsel, and Matthew Friedrich, who became the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division during the Bush administration and micromanaged the prosecution of United States Senator Ted Stevens, which had to be thrown out for wrongful suppression of exculpatory evidence, but not until the Democrats had changed the balance of power in the United States Senate.
Okay, these things are unethical. So my question to the American Bar Association is, why are they not policing their own?
I have long believed that bar associations exist more to protect lawyers than they do clients and society as a whole. I had the leading legal ethics expert in the country, or at least one of them, Bill Hodes, who wrote the treatise The Law of Lawyering, file grievances against Rumler and Friedrich and Weissman. He did it pro bono. They were massive compilations of law, ethical decisions, everything. The one we filed in Texas bounced like a rubber ball, came back by return mail as if we hadn't written anything that could even be considered. The one against Catherine Rumler in the District of Columbia kind of laid there being considered supposedly until it turned to dust. And the one against Andrew Weissman, this is really priceless. Because he was Deputy Director of the FBI at the time, he was being defended by the Civil Division of the Department of Justice. The New York Bar, without even telling us, sent it in the middle of the night to the Office of Professional Responsibility within the Department of Justice to decide the grievance.
Okay. These people are not just un-American. they are anti-American. In other words, what they're doing is harming America itself, fraying the fabric of the republic. So these are the enemies of every American. I guess my question is, how did they get the power that they have? It's one thing to try to hold them to account now. How did they get this power?
Well, they were all assistant U.S. attorneys in different places, so some U.S. attorney hired them. And then when Michael Chertoff and Bob Mueller and other people decided to handpick the prosecutors for the Enron task force, instead of looking for prosecutors with a reputation for justice and fairness, they handpicked prosecutors who were known as, quote, terrors.
Now, why everyone, when Bob Mueller was first appointed to do his job a couple of years ago, many people, including people that I know and respect tremendously, like Justice Pirro, said, he's basically a good guy. It seems to me that if this is the case, if Bob Mueller was appointing these terrors way back, in the Enron case, that something is off here. We're missing something fundamental. If this was going on, that didn't happen yesterday.
Exactly. And it was going on. I mean, I knew that Bob Mueller was no Boy Scout when he brought Andrew Weissman back to the FBI as general counsel and deputy director. He's been promoting Andrew Weissman and protecting him for more than 2 decades.
I guess I wonder why someone like maybe Fox News wouldn't do a full expose on Andrew Weissman. It's one thing for Sean Hannity to mention his name. It's another thing to put the facts in front of the American people, because this is a grotesque abuse of power. It's the antithesis of everything upon which we were founded 243 years ago. It's staggering to me that this is happening. You can tell I'm sputtering because I cannot believe the level at which these folks have gotten away with this.
Oh, yes. And then to be appointed again to Mueller's task force on the Russia collusion investigation. That report was predominantly Andrew Weissman's report, not Bob Mueller's.
And what is Andrew Weissman doing today?
He is an MSNBC contributor now. They hired him to talk about all the impeachment issues and everything, and he teaches at NYU.
He teaches at NYU. Isn't that sweet? Okay, so when we're talking about where things stand right now, you are working, of course, on the Flynn case. You're representing General Michael Flynn. What else is happening that we should be aware of along these lines, generally?
Well, I've also worked on another book called Conviction Machine with Harvey Silverglate that should be coming out in February. Harvey wrote 3 felonies a day about the same time I wrote License to Lie, I think. And his thesis is that the average American going about their daily business commits 3 felonies every day without even knowing it, because we have a serious problem with Congress having passed too many laws,
right,
not to mention prosecutors being willing to stretch those beyond any conceivable or any preconceived definition of what they were supposed to be. So between the two, we have a serious problem of overcriminalization and abuse of criminal laws generally.
Well, there's a lot here to unpack. Stalin infamously said, you show me the man and I will show you the crime. In other words, when you live in a police state, when you live in a place where there are too many laws, and by the way, laws equal government, and we're supposed to have as little government as possible. We're supposed to govern ourselves so that we don't need laws for every little thing. And the less people govern themselves, the greater the welter of laws and government becomes. And so it seems to me that this is happening in our lifetime.
It is.
We're going to go to a break. We'll be right back with Sidney Powell. The book is License to Lie. Sidney, it's unbelievable what you're saying. It's horrifying, but I thank God that I'm sitting here talking to you in a free country where we can still fight. You're fighting. You talk about people, you've mentioned these names, Weissman and others. What do you think our way of dealing with this, what is the way forward? I mentioned earlier that when you talk about having more and more laws, to me, that is more and more government. The government is growing. And the more the government grows, the less people are, in fact, able to govern themselves. it is bad for everybody. It's bad for the whole world, because if we are not a shining beacon of genuine liberty and self-government, it's certainly not going to be happening any other place. We're supposed to be encouraging people along these lines, and what we're fighting for our own lives along these lines. So I guess my question is, you're a sort of a lonely voice, alas, but I'm glad you're a voice. Who else is aware of this? Is this president aware of this? When he talks about going after the deep state or the swamp, does he understand that this is a big piece of it?
I'm not sure how much he understands that. I don't know whether anybody has addressed those particular issues with him or not. But we need a Walmart-sized rollback of criminal laws to begin with, and regulations. And we need to abolish the absolute immunity that federal prosecutors enjoy, even for their intentional and deliberate misconduct that would be a crime if committed by anyone else.
I mean, look, everybody says they hate lawyers, they tell lawyer jokes, but what you're telling me is that, in fact, this kind of prosecutorial abuse, which is at least unethical and ought to be illegal, has increased and is rampant. In other words, they are not governing themselves. That the American Bar Association and these lawyers, they seem to put ethics aside, and they say, if I can get away with it and not be prosecuted, not be taken to task, it's okay. That's not the way America works.
No. It's result-driven prosecutions to achieve social objectives in far too many cases.
I'm horrified to hear this. We were talking earlier about the case of Maria Butina off the air. She's someone that was branded a Russian agent. I happen to know most of the details of that case. It's a classic case of what you're describing. It is a horror what they did to this young woman in her late 20s, utterly innocent, framed because they wanted to squeeze her, and they squeezed her by putting her in solitary. It is a nightmare that should never happen to any American. She, of course, is here from Russia studying, and they squeezed this young woman so horribly that she finally pled guilty to the most absolutely benign, stupid little thing that was kind of puffed up in the news into being that she's a Russian spy, and her name was dragged through the mud, and on and on and on and on. And as I say, because I know the details just of her case, and because I know her personally, I thought to myself, the fact that this happens in my country could not be more grievous to me. I'm just stunned that those prosecutors got away with it, that they're getting away with it.
Oh, yes. It is stunning, and it's horrifying. And the ACLU and the United Nations have decried solitary confinement as torture. But did anybody speak out on her behalf?
No.
Other than an article I wrote, not that I know of.
Well,
and the same with Paul Manafort. They broke Paul Manafort in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement will drive a sane man insane within 24 hours.
I am really deeply grieved for my country. I love this country, and when I hear about this kind of thing, if we don't deal with this, it's over. There are many fronts on which we're fighting the larger battle for freedom. It strikes me as this is the one that has gotten the least attention. What can we do about that other than have you on a show like this to lay it out? It's just stunning to me.
It is. It's absolutely horrifying. But other than making people aware of the problem, which is why I wrote License to Lie in the first place, to try to raise public awareness of the problem and get the word to the president that there are a lot more reforms that are needed, I'm not sure what else we can do.
General Flynn, we talked about him earlier. It's one thing to get him exonerated. Okay, that to me is basic. But he had a job that he was going to do. Is there any chance that he could return to do that job? I mean, it seems to me that job,
that job needs doing in the worst way.
Well, right,
yes.
To audit all intel agencies and on and on and on. This is called draining the swamp. Is there any way that he might be reinstated to do that?
That would be up to the president and him, of course. I don't know whether he'd be willing to go back in and do it or not. I can't speak for him in that regard.
I think the president should get on his knees and beg General Flynn to do this for the sake of the country. This needs being done. I mean, people talk about J. Edgar Hoover.
Well, look at what they did to John Radcliffe. The president was going to appoint John Radcliffe, who I thought would have been a great DNI. And he couldn't even get him through the committee.
I don't remember what the deal was with Radcliffe. There was something, but it seems to me that this ought to be the highest priority for this administration. As I hear you talk, I'm just stunned. But what's interesting, Sidney, is it does come down to ethics and virtue. In other words, if it's only the law that's protecting us, there has to be a culture of virtue among lawyers. We have to insist that they behave differently. Because otherwise they're like criminals. They get away with what they can get away with.
Yes, and
the legal field is far too important in our nation for them to behave this way.
There need to be far better standards set for federal prosecutors and far more supervision. The Office of Professional Responsibility in the Department of Justice, as far as I'm concerned, is an absolute embarrassment. I've never seen an instance where they did anything but circle the wagons to protect the prosecutors.
Well, look, we have an AG now named Barr who seems to me to get some of this stuff. Do you suppose that he might spearhead some of this?
I certainly hope he will. I know he's doing it with respect to the whole investigation of the Russia mess, and that Durham is supposed to be looking into all of it. And frankly, I'm expecting some indictments to come out of Mr. Durham's investigation.
And when are we going to get the results of that investigation?
I would think we would get indictments starting within the next few months.
Within the next few months. Are you able to say?
I have no inside information on it. I'm just judging by the.
But would you be willing to guess who might be indicted? I mean, it seems like you probably know enough to make some guesses.
Well, there's definitely been a criminal referral of Mr. Kleinsmith, the FBI lawyer who deliberately falsified a document with respect to Carter Page to make sure they got the FISA warrant applications approved. That is, in fact, a crime for which he should certainly be prosecuted. And, of course, McCabe was criminally referred for any number of instances. I think it was 3 instances of lying under oath in interviews about which he was warned and knew exactly why he was being interviewed and what about. In fact, he even lied about having lied in one of them, I think.
This is like the mafia running America. I mean,
with the imprimatur and all the weight and might of the United States of America and its the government.
That's the point. It's something that the American people ought not to stand for. When you talk about some of these folks, who are guilty and may well be indicted and should be indicted, we have to go backwards. I mean, the President of the United States, President Obama, he seems to have given his imprimatur to this sort of thing. Do you suppose that this will ever find its way back to him? This didn't happen in a vacuum.
No, it didn't happen in a vacuum. And of course, we have the Strzok-Page text messages to each other about the president wants to know everything and the White House is running this. And I think there is certainly a trail of evidence that is going to lead to that, not the least of which is James Comey's memo of January 6th, where he goes into the Oval Office and they plan his briefing of candidate or President-elect Trump the very next day about the salacious aspects of the Steele dossier, which was the basis for the FISA application.
Well, I guess my question is, do you think that people have the appetite to push this? I mean, you remember... we're both old enough to remember a little bit about Watergate, and it was always the question about, was it the president or was it his people acting on their own? It seems to me that President Obama and Hillary Clinton were genuinely involved in this, and that it behooves us as Americans to insist that everybody be treated with the same standards of justice. We'll be right back, folks. Sidney, when your new book comes out early next year, we've got to have you back to talk about that. But people can find you at Twitter, Sidney Powell #1, and it's SIDNEY Powell, POWELL, and the numeral 1. And I follow you on Twitter, and I will retweet your stuff. This is just so important that I sputter, because I cannot believe that we're not dealing with it on a more global scale as a country, that this issue doesn't have champions very much beyond you. What can we do?
Well, we need to abolish absolute immunity for prosecutors to begin with.
How do we do that?
It would take Congress to pass an exception to the Federal Tort Claims Act that allowed them to be sued for intentional misconduct. And they could also put some teeth in and codify the rule that requires them to produce exculpatory evidence.
But it doesn't sound like a Democrat-controlled Congress would be inclined to do this.
You would think they would, because they always champion, rights of defendants.
Yeah, that's like 40 years ago, Sidney.
Apparently.
So first we have to win back the House. This is so crucial. This is, again, I want to say to my fellow Americans, forget about Trump. This is about America. You can hate this president with many good reasons and understand that he is nonetheless able to get some of these things done. I just feel like if you care about America, you've got to put your emotions aside and understand that, God forbid, he is not reelected and we don't take the House back. Everything you're talking about,
it's going to get worse in spades.
It's going to get much worse, because corruption is something that, unfortunately, the Democrats have seemed to feel that if it works for them, they're willing to go with it. Now, it's not that the GOP is utterly exempt, but right now we're talking about some really, really partisan Democrats.
It's the weaponization of our entire judicial system, the weaponization of the powers of prosecutors to achieve particular ends, whether justified or not. And in this case, in a lot of these cases, completely unjustified.
I've always been a fan of Rudy Giuliani, but I wonder if he did not abuse prosecutorial powers when he was a U.S. Attorney General here in New York. It seems to me that he did a lot of heavy-handed stuff.
He was the U.S. Attorney for one of the districts here in New York. I think it was the Southern District, which is, of course, very famous. And that district has had problems for a long time, being overly aggressive and over-criminalizing. And I think he did exercise far too heavy a hand in any number of instances, and he might even realize that now. I think I've heard him say something to that effect.
I mean, frog marching, Wall Street financiers to humiliate them, that's the kind of thing that, was done to General Flynn and to others. We have. It seems to me that in America we've not operated that way.
I call it prosecutorial terrorist tactics. Andrew Weissman is famous for those. As soon as I heard that Paul Manafort's door had been opened in the middle of the night, in the wee hours of the morning, and his wife searched in her nightgown in their bed as if she had a weapon in the bed with her, I knew that was Andrew Weissman prosecutorial terrorist tactics.
And Roger Stone famously,
yes.
What the heck was that?
Absolutely ridiculous. Here Christopher Wray is crying about the lack of resources in the FBI. It happened during the government shutdown, and they sent 26 agents, 16 cars, frogmen, a boat, a helicopter, and I don't know what all, when Roger Stone would have voluntarily walked to the office the next day and turned himself in. It was an outrage.
I find myself speechless. This is so disturbing. I keep wanting to know who in the current administration might be willing to take this on. A.G. Barr, of course, is a little bit busy, but it seems that this is his bailiwick.
It is his bailiwick. I also think we need a new FBI director, one who's willing to turn it upside down and shake it out and set new standards for all the agents. What happened to Manafort should not have happened. What happened to Roger Stone should not have happened. They need to lose
their arrogance. This was under
arrogance.
Wray's watch.
Yes.
So why has the president not gotten rid of him?
I don't know.
We're just gonna have a pregnant pause there, folks. I mean, this is sickening. I guess I get very angry as an American for my country.
Oh, wait until you read the book.
This is so unacceptable. Well, I mean, I just want my audience to know that this is unacceptable for America. Forget, Trump and GOP and Democrat. This is unacceptable in America. I will go out on a limb and say that I believe torture is unacceptable in America, and some of the enhanced interrogation techniques, begin to creep over into that. If we don't hold ourselves to the highest standard, we simply cease to be America. And that doesn't mean that, I don't believe in fighting or getting our hands dirty when we need to. But when I hear about these kinds of things, I think we are better than this. That's the cliche. But this kind of stuff is unworthy of the nation given to us by the great founders 2.5 centuries ago, and we need to deal with it. We'll be right back. I'm talking to Sidney Powell. The book is Licensed to Lie. And I want to go back to Mike Flynn. General Flynn, whatever happens to him, will he be able to write a book about this?
Yes, he will be, and he has a very strong story to tell.
I have to tell you, I'm just, I'm so amazed at this. It's funny because this president has had to, I guess, stand apart to some extent. But at some point, it seems to me, he would have to be willing to pardon Roger Stone and Mike Flynn. And it really, I don't know how these things work, or, when presidents can and should do that kind of thing. Do you have a sense of any of this? Because he's the president of the United States.
Right. Well, it's totally discretionary. People have assumed that General Flynn hired me because he wants a pardon. Well, no, that's not why I was hired at all. I was hired to turn this upside down and get it right, which is kind of my specialty. So,
and it's way more important than getting a pardon for General Flynn.
Yes, I want to see him completely exonerated and the government held to account for its outrageous government misconduct. And Judge Sullivan is the perfect judge to be in charge of that sort of proceeding, because that's what he did in the Stevens case.
And where is Judge Sullivan?
He is in Washington. He's a federal district judge in Washington. He's the one who not only threw out the Stevens case, but then appointed an independent prosecutor to investigate the Department of Justice for its abuses in the Stevens case.
I'm just in awe of how far these things can creep, even in a nation like ours. It's just amazing to me, and it really does it makes people like Robert Moses and J. Edgar Hoover look like kids. That's kid stuff compared to what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And it certainly makes Watergate look like kid stuff.
I would also encourage people to read an article by Judge Jed Rakoff called Why the Innocent Plead Guilty. It's a very short article. One of the things that people harp on is, well, so-and-so pled guilty, including with respect to General Flynn. But unless you've been in that situation, you cannot imagine the pressures brought to bear on people to get a guilty plea out of them.
Right, and that's called prosecutorial abuse. I find it, again, un-American. It makes me angry. Because I know people that, like Maria Butina, that they were squeezed, and I thought to myself, we're not supposed to do that in America. This idea of prosecutors having this power and just trying to kind of move things along quickly, squeezing people to get a guilty plea, that we're not supposed to work that way.
Right, and their conviction rate, I think, is over 99%, which is something that individuals can fix when they're on juries, because there's a tendency simply to believe whatever the government says about someone. We need to have a much stronger critical eye with respect to all allegations about everyone.
We have to hold our government to a higher standard, and I think that what this does is it makes everyone cynical about their government, and everyone cynical about these institutions, which ought to be hallowed institutions. We ought to revere these institutions as those things which the founders created to give the people freedom and the ability to govern ourselves. What we're seeing now, of course, and it happens in countries all over the world, but it's not supposed to happen in America, where the government really does become corrupt, and there are various ways that things can become corrupt. But as soon as the people think they are not serving me, they're serving themselves, and I better watch myself. In other words, instead of thinking that the government is my friend because we, the people, are the government, that kind of cynicism is the death of freedom.
It is. And one of the things I found most astounding when I wrote the book was how everyone talks about how courageous I am, even in the book reviews. And I didn't even think of it as an act of courage. I felt like it was my civic duty But people say, do you have bodyguards? You know, do you have somebody starting your car for you? That's the first thing people will say to me. And I say, well, number one, God didn't give me a spirit of fear.
So you're a Christian. That's always interesting, because when you have that kind of faith, you've got something that enables you to live this life. Because if you were being merely calculating, perhaps you wouldn't do this.
I guess not. It was just, I literally prayed I would not have to write this book. But when I did have to write it, I had to write it, no matter what happened. Because I had to try to make the system better and for people to understand what was going wrong here.
Well, we've got a final segment with you, Sidney, so don't go away. Folks, I just want to urge you to go and get a copy of Licensed to Lie. Educate yourself on this. Follow Sidney Powell on Twitter or whatever you can do. I also want to urge you, while I have the opportunity, as you know, this month we are raising money for Christian Solidarity International. They are literally freeing actual slaves in Africa. I want to let you know, folks, there's nothing metaphorical about this. This is not slaves in quotes. We have radical Muslims who believe slavery is a good thing and that they can wield it legitimately against people they think less than themselves. Is this ringing a bell? That's what slavery is, folks. We abolished that in this country a long time ago. It was abolished in Europe, but it is thriving in Africa today. And it is usually Christians who would rather be enslaved and raped and killed than denounce their own faith to protect themselves. Think about that kind of courage. They're being enslaved by radical Muslims, and as bad as that is, there's good news. We can do something about it. For $250, which I think you know is nothing compared to the freedom of a human being, we can give to CSI $250, and CSI can free the slaves. They do not purchase their freedom per se, because they don't want to encourage people to enslave others to make money. But what they do is they take a cattle vaccine and they basically make a trade. They say, we'll give this cattle vaccine to you for your cattle that you treat better than you treat these human beings. And they use that and a number of other things. They're on the ground, but they need your help. Without your money, they can't do this. This is obviously expensive. It's huge. They have freed many slaves. Unfortunately, there are many more yet to free. This is real. We need your help. Go to my website, metaxastalk.com. You'll see the banner for CSI, metaxastalk.com. Not my website, ericmetaxas.com, metaxastalk.com. Please give as generously as you can. We'll be right on my TV variety Christmas special. There's going to be a character, I'm not going to tell you who it is, performing that song under the stage name Duck Owens. It's got something to do with the Duck Dynasty gang. I don't want to give it away, but it will blow your mind. You're going to have to rewatch it to make sure that it wasn't the cough medicine. It's that kooky. I'm talking to Sidney Powell. The book is Licensed to Lie. Sidney, what is your book, the new book that you're coming out with in February?
It's called Conviction Machine, Standing Up to Federal Prosecutorial Abuse, and it's co-authored by Harvey Silverglate, who wrote 3 Felonies a Day.
Okay. Harvey Silverglate, he seems to be on this issue with you.
Yes.
Are there others besides Harvey that are taking this kind of thing on or that are talking about this?
No, not that I can think of right now. And Harvey has not focused on prosecutorial abuse as much as he has focused on overcriminalization.
Right.
But we were a perfect team to co-author this book, and I really appreciate him inviting me to do it with him.
Is that book on Amazon yet, even though for pre-order?
It is available on Amazon.
Okay, so tell us the title again.
Conviction Machine, Standing Up to Federal Prosecutorial Abuse.
Conviction Machine. We have to have you on. It's coming out when in February?
Late February, I think.
Well, the next time you're in New York City, you need to come here and let's talk about that so that you can launch the book with a bang. And I'd welcome talking to Harvey Silverglate as well if he's ever in New York. Because, most people listening to this program, they're maybe as ignorant as I am of this kind of thing. But when you begin to understand it, it's not that complicated. It's clear, what is happening. It's clear that it's wrong. And if we, the American people, don't do something about this, we deserve to live in a corrupt post-America America, because that is where we are going. And if not for folks like you, who are a hero, unfortunately, doing your duty makes you a hero today because so few people are doing their duty. But if not for folks like you writing books like this, when you say you prayed not to write this book, why do you say that?
Because the only reason I had to write the book was because the system had failed. Usually in the cases that I've had, and I've had over 500 federal cases, I could either get it to come out right or at least understand why it didn't. And in the Merrill Lynch Enron case in particular, the result was not rational or right in any way, shape, or form. And then when the bar associations refused to do anything about the problem, there was nothing I could do except bring it to the attention of the public and try to make people understand how damaging it is for a wrongful conviction to occur and how it destroys so many lives, far more than just the wrongfully convicted defendant. I wanted people to be able to feel the toll it takes on everyone involved in that. So the book, people get emotional. They ride an emotional roller coaster as they read it, I've been told.
Let me ask you, is anyone talking about making this into a movie? It seems to me tailor-made for such a thing.
It would be perfect for Clint Eastwood to do on the heels of the Richard Jewell movie, which I understand everybody should see, and I can't wait to see because that's another good example of what happens when they get determined to convict the wrong person.
We're at a point in America where if we, the people, don't begin understanding this and fighting on all these fronts, it's game over and we deserve it. Folks, whatever you're doing, get away from your phone and focus on what God might lead you to do in this. I have to say, Sidney Powell, it's an honor to have you on. Congratulations on all you've done, and I hope it's only the beginning, and I hope to see you again. Folks, the book is Licensed to Lie.